please do feel free to clap as well. We will feel the energy even if we don't hear it. Just a quick note for our panelists and our moderators, we will be strict on time today. We will be strict on time throughout our 4 days. So our sessions are an hour, 30 minutes of moderation and discussion between the panelists. We then open up to the audience for 30 minutes. So audience, this is the time that you also take to take down your notes. When it is time for the Q&A, please do get involved. And just a quick warning, those who don't get involved, I have no problems picking and asking you questions myself. And the last thing that I would like you to note today is on your chairs, you did note little gadgets that were there. Those are translation devices. For those who need those services, please feel free to utilize them. There should be a headset available as well. If you do not have a headset or you have problems with your device and you need to use it, please just see the gentleman at the desk behind you. They will be in a position to help you out. All right, now we have an amazing 4 days ahead of us. Are we ready? Yes. Can we jump right into it? Yes. Brilliant. Now, the other thing that I had not mentioned is anytime anybody comes up or is introduced to come forward, we welcome them forward with a loud round of applause. So let's practice that. Can we have a round of applause, please? All right, excellent. Now, allow me to, of course, acknowledge the Permanent Secretary of Agriculture, Fisheries and Rural Development from the Government of Zimbabwe, Professor Orbit Ejiri. He will be joining us shortly. Professor Florence Mtambanengwe, who is the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Research, Innovation and Academic Affairs of the University of Zimbabwe. Honorable Ambassador Josepha Sako in absentia. This is the Commissioner for the African Commission, Darby. This is in absentia, as I have noted. Now, policymakers from the African Union member states who are joining us today, Dr. Patrice Takumkam. I hope I got that right. Did I? Okay, I'll get the correction later on. Who is the sub-regional coordinator for Southern Africa and a representative for Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Eswatini, Food and Agriculture with FAO. Mia Beers, who is the Deputy Assistant Administrator, USAID Bureau for Resilience and Food Security. Calvin Banda, representing Professor Kevin Urama, who is the Chief Economist and a Vice President of the African Development Bank. Stephen Karangizi, who is the immediate past director and CEO of the Africa Legal Support Faculty at the AFDB. Dr. Apollos Nwafo, who is the Vice President, Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. Dr. Damas Philip, Chair of the ReNAPRI Board of Directors. Professor Edward Ntandwa, Department of Agriculture, Business, Development and Economics, Faculty of Agriculture, Environment and Food Systems, University of Zimbabwe. Dr. Nalishebo Mibelo, who is the Executive Director of ReNAPRI Secretariat, Development Partners here present, Research and Academics, the private sector present, farmers and non-state actors, members of the media, distinguished virtual participants. From this point on, I think I've done it all for everybody who comes forward. I will allow us all to drop protocol. However, I think because I'm in a room full of academics today, I would like to retitle myself from Director of Ceremonies to Professor of Ceremonies. So for the next 4 days, allow me to be the Professor of Ceremonies. It is therefore my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to get our program kick-started off this morning as I welcome forward Dr. Anthony Chapato, who will be leading our first session. Now, the first discussion will, of course, be, if I can find it. All right, he will come up and he'll introduce the first discussion. Please welcome him up with a round of applause.
Good morning. Thank you, Candice, for those welcoming remarks. I'm energized myself, and also your applause, I think, for me is pretty good. I just wanted to get things straight. Am I going to buy back any time that I've lost this morning, Candice?
Yes, because it was me talking.
Okay, thank you very much. I think let me, at this juncture, tell you that today, this is the first session of the conference, and it's a privilege. that I lead it. I am the moderator of a very esteemed panel and presenters. The session is titled Beyond the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit, Support to Operationalization of the Action Plan. We were hoping that this session would be held after the summit. But unfortunately, the summit was put off until the first quarter of next year. But it still remains beyond that summit, because what we are going to discuss today is to say, what is it that we need to do? Summits come and go, but we need to ensure that the problems that continue to persist in Africa, particularly in terms of crop productivity, are sorted out now and in a sustainable manner. Climate change is here to stay with us, and if we are not very serious, we will not be able to eat. I will not go into great depth, but let me recognize the keynote speakers and then also my panelists. I think we have John Olowande, a research fellow at Tagemeyo Institute, one of ReNAPRI institutes. He is going to tell us more about what the network has done this past year in support of the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit. And then we also have Shami Zingore, my brother. He's the Director of Research and Development, Africa Plant Nutrition and Institute. You'll see him when I bring him to the table. I mean to the chairs up here. And then we have Constance Miembeyembe, the Country Director for Malawi, Zambia, and Tanzania under IFDC. And then we have William Chaza, the Executive Director of Mopata, another ReNAPRI center. And then online, we should have Marie-Claire Kalihambo, the Coordinator for Africa Fertilizer Financing Mechanism. And then also online, we are joined by Dr. Maria Wanzala, the Policy Services Director at AFAP. And in the room, we have two other very important people. We have Dr. Lizelle Weiss, that's an international consultant working with FARA and other partners. And last but not the least, I have Vandi Gamba, an agricultural officer from the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development in Nigeria. So you can see it's really a great team that we have. So what are the objectives of this session? I'm not going to read them verbatim. I've been interfacing with fertilizer and soil health, I think, for the past year, coordinating the different centers to produce quality outputs in support of the summit. Basically what it is what is the science behind the problems we face? What can we do to resolve those problems? Since 2006 Abuja Declaration, what have we achieved? What do we need to change? What is the role of different partners, including research institutes like ReNAPRI? What is the role of international community? What is the role of our governments, etc.? So we will learn more about this as we go through the session. So the session basically will start with two presentations. One, I'll invite John Olowande to come up. He will give you a bit about some of the key results we have generated. And then I'll invite Shami, who will give us a snapshot of what is in the draft action plan. It remains a draft because it has not yet been endorsed by the heads of government, but there is a draft action plan. So he will do a short presentation on that. After that, I'll invite the panel, ask them a few questions, and then we can have an open discussion. And hopefully I can still be on time, because these issues of food, and I can ask everyone here who has not eaten today. We interface with food almost 4 or 5 times a day. So food is very important. So with that, I think, John, where are you? John, please come and give us the first presentation. Thank you. Can we?
Thank you very much. I'm John Olwande, as you have heard, and I'm going to make a presentation about the research that ReNAPRI and its partners conducted in support of the African Soil Health Action Plan that we expected to be launched and agreed upon in the African Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit last month, but it has been scheduled for the first quarter of next year. So it seems this is not what we call agroecological conditions.
3 minutes.
Supporting national adaptive research, development, and extension is critical, and this will require building a strong local and regional Africa-led research, development, and extension systems, and increasing the number of extension officers and updating their skills, making them the skills relevant with the times so that they can apply, or rather they can deploy and deliver those technologies to the farmers appropriately. There is also need, therefore, to strengthen the funding to those research, development, and extension systems, which are severely underfunded in the context of sub-Saharan Africa. Number 3, we need to improve the fertilizer and soil health policies and regulatory environment in the countries to promote private sector investment in fertilizer trade and distribution. And this will require building think tanks that will be able to provide policy support and advice to the governments. And 2, streamlining of existing policies and regulations that will reduce the cost of doing business by the private sector. And of course, there are complementary investments that are required in infrastructure, including irrigation and transport. Lastly, developing a soil information management system for Africa is very important, especially now that we'll be having a 10-year action plan. We need a system that is going to track progress using some specific metrics that will help us identify where are we going to and what adjustments do we need to make. And also we need to strengthen education and training on soil health management on the continent. It turns out that soil science graduates are few on the continent, and I was just talking with one of my colleagues at the university, Egerton University, where we come, and we noted that the soil science department attracts very few students. So we really need training in that area that we can strengthen human and institutional capacity around soil health management. I acknowledge the lead authors for these studies, plus the partners that worked with ReNAPRI, including those that are listed there, and the panel of reviewers that conducted review for these 3 studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. You know, when you're a researcher, you're tempted to try to summarize again, but I'm not going to be tempted at all. I am going to, at this time, invite Shami, who is going to tell us a little bit about the draft Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan, trying to respond to some of the things that John raised. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, moderator. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here at this conference and discussing a topic of regional, continental, and global interest, the topic related to fertilizer and soil health. What I'm going to present today is work that has been conducted by multiple stakeholders put together by the African Union to inform of the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan. That is a key rallying point for pulling together the necessary investments that are necessary to turn the tide against the current situation of land degradation and declining soil health and low crop productivity. A large part of what I'm presenting is the action plan of the African Union, which is very much informed by the studies that John presented earlier, so he has made my work a lot easy, and I'm transcribing all this information on the studies done into what the African Union has put together as the key priorities for investments to improve soil health. But before I go to the contents of the action plan, I just want to re-emphasize and put the context of fertilizer and soil health in Africa in context. A key part of the challenge that we face that is always exhibited in poverty, malnutrition, and hunger all starts in the soil. We are faced with a situation where we have increasing soil degradation and low crop productivity, which are reinforcing challenges that are all catalyzed by poor investments in fertilizer and soil health management. I just want to start by submitting to us that nothing can work right in African agriculture if our soils are not right. The starting point for sustainability of agriculture has to be nowhere else rather than in the soils. And just to put some key numbers of the crisis that we are facing as the continent, very much at the center of the problems, as John has illustrated, low fertilizer use and poor management are very much at the core of the challenges that we face. And over the long term, this has culminated into serious challenges of land degradation, and it is now estimated that just soil nutrient losses account for a bill of about $4 to $10 billion on the continent. And we are also faced with a situation where 65% of our soils are considered to be degraded. This is a debatable number, but it very much shows the potential magnitude of the challenge that we are facing up with. And it also costs us close to $70 billion in lost productivity and some of the ecosystem services that are supported by healthy soils. And then this also results in all the other situations around the environmental challenges, greenhouse gas emissions, as well as some of the challenges related to climate change aggravation due to emission of greenhouse gases, but also due to the erosion of the capacity of the soils to support essential ecosystem services. And then what is really needed to turn around this tide of land degradation and the vicious cycle of poor soil management and leading to poor livelihoods, we need to have a rallying call for farmer-centric investments that optimize soil fertility using integrated solutions that address not just soils but also nutrients and water management in a holistic way with the necessary supporting environment in policies and markets as well, so that we have an enabling environment that can support investments in fertilizer and in soil health as well. With this background, the African Union developed the action plan with the support of multiple institutions, including APNI, working as part of the technical and policy work groups. And we now have a very compelling action plan that articulates the priorities for investments in soil health and fertilizer for the next decades on the continent. The overall action plan is actually part of a longer term and bigger initiative called the Soil Initiative for Africa. I don't have time to go into those details, but the Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan is the implementing framework for the broader long-term initiatives, the Soil Initiative for Africa, which is part of the bigger umbrella for the priorities of action of the actions required at the continental level to improve the overall soil and fertilizer use situation. Now, moving on to how the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan is positioned to build and support other, previous and existing commitments. It's very much building on the first fertilizer summit implemented from 2006, and this was very much centric on fertilizers, but recognizing some of the broader challenges of soil health and land degradation. The new initiative now combines both fertilizer and soil health to ensure not just fertilizer, for improved productivity, but also considering the long-term sustainability of systems. And then we very much recognize the commitments currently articulated in the Malabo 2014 for accelerated growth and transformation, for shared prosperity and improved livelihoods. And the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan very much builds and is centered on helping to achieve some of the provision of the Malabo Declaration. Now, I just want to give key highlights of what is covered in the action plan. You realize that a large part of the structure and the actions are very much aligned with what John has presented, because we use that evidence to determine the key priorities and to identify the most compelling actions that are needed for addressing the overall situation on the continent. The overall vision is very much articulated around implementing an action plan that will reverse soil degradation, accelerate inclusive agricultural transformation, with a key goal of ending poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. So the outcomes are really resonating with the broader continental development and ensuring economic development, as well as alleviating hunger and malnutrition. So very much at the top level, the vision is centered on poverty, hunger, and malnutrition alleviation. And this is to be achieved by ensuring that we have a healthier soil resource base and sustainable food systems and enhanced climate resilience, which resonates well with the theme of the conference. And to achieve that, we have to harness multi-stakeholder partnerships and investments that ensure we have the necessary policy markets and capacity for sustainable management. And the action plan is centered around 4 outcome areas that build towards the overall impact and vision, and those 4 include improving the policy and market environment, including financial access, and then number 2, ensuring that we address the challenges of improving access to affordability of fertilizers, but we also emphasize the need for organic nutrient resources and other nature-based solutions that are needed to complement fertilizers to ensure that we have sustainable management practices. And then at the management level, which is where John emphasized in his presentation, ensuring that we have greater efficiency in use of fertilizers, which also translates into more sustainable use of fertilizers, as well as ensuring that fertilizers are used in an optimally agronomic and economically manner as well. And then lastly, there is an outcome area that emphasizes the need for ensuring that we have the necessary capacity that supports innovation and development of relevant solutions that are very much embedded in the understanding of the unique context and challenges that we face on the continent. So the issue of building institutional and human capacity is very much foundational to ensure the successful implementation of the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan. I'll just skim through very quickly some of the core activities under each of the outcome areas. In the outcome area 1 on policies and enabling finance and market environment, key outputs include improved policy environment, and I'm sure this is very much a key issue that this conference should be able to address in a compelling way. And then the issue around ensuring that we have the right financial instruments for ensuring business investment, but also ensuring that we have the necessary financial incentives right across the full value chain is very fundamental as well. And then in outcome area number 2, we very much focus on improved access and affordability of organic and mineral fertilizers. And under outcome area 2, we have 2 core outputs, and this include increased low carbon domestic production and distribution of fertilizers. Currently, Africa relies largely on imported fertilizers and highly susceptible to some of the market disruptions like we had during the COVID crisis and the Ukraine war crisis as well. And secondly, ensuring that we support and promote intra-regional fertilizer trade. So those are 2 key actions that are part of the outcome area number 2. And then moving on to outcome area number 3, which is very much focuses on the sustainable use of fertilizers and sustainable soil health management at the farm level. Issues around agronomic fertilizer use efficiency is very, very key, and that very much builds on the first outcome area of ensuring that we have the right recommendations at the right scales to support effective fertilizer management, and then establishing a digital information platform that ensures improved access to information for decision-making by various stakeholders. And then lastly, focusing so much on the scope of soil health and water management to ensure that we have the supporting mechanisms that are needed to efficiently use inputs, especially related to organic and inorganic fertilizers. Then lastly, the outcome area 4 is very much around institutional and human capacity development. And a large part of the efforts go into supporting support for locally relevant soil information management technology development by building local capacity, especially for adapting management to local conditions, and then also scale appropriate advisory services on soils and crops available to smallholder farming systems, then ensuring regional networks for knowledge sharing exchange established to ensure that we have regional coordination and harmonization of investments, and then lastly, ensuring that we have the right fertilizer analytical services available to ensure fertilizer quality assurance. So this forms the core actions and outcomes and outputs of the Africa Soil Health Action Plan, and the overall implementation is very much coordinated and supported by the Africa Union Commission, and working together with AUDA NEPAD, they will form the leadership of implementation, but working with key stakeholders from the development partners, private sector, and also the some of the non-governmental organizations that are part of the core stakeholders to support the overall implementation. And then in conclusion, delivering the success of the continental fertilizer and soil health success will very much center around ensuring that we have a commitment. We should not just talk, but walk the talk in delivery of the actions that are needed to address the pressing needs. But also this has to be African-led, but in an inclusive partnership platform that supports the relevant agenda that is developed locally. And I just want to underscore, most importantly, ensuring that we have coordinated public and private sector efforts in the investments and ensuring that we have the critical mass of investments to ensure that we address the challenges that we face on the continent in a most efficient and effective way possible. Thank you very much. I appreciate your audience and look forward to discussing some of these issues that I've articulated today.
Thank you very much, Shami. One thing, Africa-owned, Africa-led, Africa-financed. We have a big job. The challenge is big. So that's the session that we are going into now. We want to engage. First, I know people have questions or comments based on the keynote presentations, but I will not allow you to ask those questions yet. We'll open up the session a little bit later, but I want us to have the panelists, people who have been interfacing with different sectors, the people who have been working on raising finance to ensure that we implement the first declaration in 2006. Their policy analysts, their researchers, and they're also implementers in the country. So I want to see if we can have a discussion. So I'm going to call my panelists. Vanti, please come and sit by the corner there. William, please come and sit there. My sister, come and sit here. And then Lisu, please come and sit this side. And then online, if we can have that's Maria and Marie-Claire. Fantastic. Okay, I see Marie-Claire. I don't see Maria yet, but because I want to start this discussion with Maria.
Sorry, Anthony, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Fantastic.
I'm trying to start my video, but it's saying you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. I'm not sure what that means.
No, we love you so much and we miss you. We wish you were here. So I want to start with you. So my question to you, I think the first one has to do with what transpired in 2006 and what we have achieved to date. So the Abuja Fertilizer Summit in 2026 delivered a set of outcomes that have provided increased attention to addressing the growing challenges in building resilient soil health and fertilizer interventions. Yet, many governments have been unable to live up to the Abuja commitments. Maria, tell us, how did we perform? I think the audience here are eager to listen to you to say, how did we perform after committing to changing the status quo? And also, how can we also ensure local implementation? I'll stop there so that at least you can kickstart us and then move on to Vandi so that you can tell us you're from Nigeria. That's where the first summit was held. So Maria, please go ahead. You have about 3-4 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Anthony. So how did we perform? Well, as you know, the Abuja Declaration is comprised of 12 resolutions, which delineate interventions that are supposed to be taken at the regional and national level to increase fertilizer use to a target of 50 kilograms of nutrients per hectare. So I think the simplest and most useful way I can answer the question of how we have performed is to provide a brief, going resolution by resolution, assessing how countries have performed in a spectrum ranging from poor to partially satisfactory to good. Okay, now you can see me. All right. So if I can step back and summarize, only one resolution has made good progress, and that is resolution number 5, which calls for governments to grant targeted subsidies to their farmers. And then one resolution has made satisfactory progress, and that's resolution number 7, which calls for increased fertilizer production and interregional trade. For the remaining 10 resolutions, the progress has been partially satisfactory. But it is important to point out that overall there has been progress. None of the resolutions registered poor progress per se. Now, to provide some details, resolution number 5, as I said, where progress has been good, calls for governments to provide targeted subsidies to their farmers. Progress has been good because the majority of countries in Africa do have some form of a subsidy in place. And as a result, as much as 50% of the fertilizer consumed on the continent is subsidized. And these subsidies range from your universal non-targeted subsidies, with complete government control, to targeted programs where you have importation and distribution by the private sector. And then while these programs mainly feature fertilizers, they also feature good economic practices and agrochemicals. However, as we all know, these subsidies do have their challenges. I'm not going to go into those challenges, but the key point is that governments have lived up to the call or responded well to the call of Abuja. With regards to the other resolution where there's been above average progress, resolution number 9, which calls for promotion of regional and national fertilizer production and interregional trade. With regards to fertilizer production, since 2006, there have been large investments to increase production capacity, particularly in Nigeria and Morocco, and the number of blenders has more than doubled in sub-Saharan Africa. In Nigeria, the private sector has invested over $4 billion to increase ammonia and urea capacity. And presently in sub-Saharan Africa, there are 59 existing blending plants, plus another 19 in the pipeline, primarily in Nigeria and Tanzania. And then there's also some industrial lime being produced in some countries, such as Kenya and Rwanda, where they have soil acidity issues. And then there are also about 15 to 20 organic fertilizer plants in sub-Saharan Africa. So there has been quite good progress with regards to production. With regards to trade, we also see some progress being made. The majority of fertilizer in sub-Saharan Africa is imported. We are a net importer of fertilizer, even though we do produce some fertilizers, mainly in Algeria, Egypt, Morocco, Nigeria, and South Africa. But much of this trade involves importing from overseas through coastal countries to your landlocked countries, but some of it does involve importation from manufacturers in other African countries. So you see in East Africa, for example, countries such as Tanzania import fertilizers from manufacturers in Egypt, for example, and in South Africa. Uganda imports fertilizers from manufacturers and blenders in Kenya. So we have made some good progress with regards to fertilizer production and inter regional trade. For the remainder of the 10 resolutions, progress has been partially satisfactory. I'll just quickly summarize some of the findings. Resolution number 1 calls for an increase in fertilizer use to at least 50 kilograms per hectare. And while indeed fertilizer use in Africa has basically doubled since 2006 from an average of 8 kilograms of nutrients per hectare to around 20 kilograms of nutrients per hectare today, this is still way below the target and is insufficient in terms of increasing productivity substantially. Resolution 2 calls for harmonization of policies and regulations and for fertilizer to be declared a commodity without borders. But we see that the majority of countries in sub-Saharan Africa still do not have fertilizer policies in place. About 2/3 of them don't have fertilizer policies. About 2/3 don't have fertilizer acts and regulations, and they also don't have standards, which creates a lot of issues when it comes to quality of fertilizer. We have issues with nutrient content, adulteration, which discourages farmers from using fertilizer. Once they have a bad experience, they are discouraged from investing their hard-earned money to buy these expensive products. Then with regards to tariffs and taxes, about 2/3 of countries still have, about 1/3 of the countries still have import duties on fertilizers, and about half of them still have some form of taxes or levies on their fertilizers. So they may not be formal taxes, but they may be, for example, in Kenya, importers pay what is called an importer declaration fee at the ports. And in Ghana and Mali, impose shipper and council taxes. So these all add up and increase the price of fertilizer that farmers have to pay at the farm gate. Resolution 3 calls for the development of agri-dealer networks. There have been very good progress in some countries in this regard. At least 1/3 of the countries have over 500 agri-dealers in their rural areas serving their farmers. And this has significantly reduced the distance farmers have to travel to less than 10 kilometers to buy a bag of fertilizer. But nevertheless, in the majority of countries, we still see there's a dearth of agri-dealers. There are thin agri-dealer networks, and so farmers have to travel at least 20 to 30 kilometers to buy a bag of fertilizer. Then the other issue is these agri-dealers also lack business and technical skills, which hampers their ability to serve their farmer clients in an optimal manner. Resolution 6 calls for accelerated infrastructure improvements. Suffice to say, although there has been investments in ports, the major ports in Africa are your Beira and Nacala in Mozambique, Mombasa in Kenya, Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, Tema in Ghana, etc. There have been some investments to improve ports, port infrastructure, but we still see that it is inadequate, which results in high freight costs. It also results in even the high FOB prices that we pay for fertilizer, because many of our ports have limited capacity, which means that they can only receive small vessels which carry 10,000 tons, for example. Which means that our importers cannot import in bulk 20 to 25,000 tons and benefit from the discounted prices, which would come along with that, the economies of scale. So we really need to do something to improve our ports. Transportation infrastructure. Many of our roads between our major cities are quite well maintained, but the issue is from the main towns and cities to the rural interior. That's where the roads can become quite inhospitable, particularly during the rainy season, and that is where the majority of the transport costs are incurred, the so-called last mile. Resolution 7 calls for establishment.
Maria,
Yes?
1 minute.
1 minute. Establishment of national financing facilities. There has been some progress there. Cost of finance is still quite high at all levels of the value chain, but there have been some progress made with regards to agreements between donors, governments, and the private sector to provide credit guarantees as well as trade finance. So there have been some strides made in that respect. Another resolution where there has been some progress is resolution number 10, calling for African governments to improve farmer access to quality seeds, crop protection products, irrigation facilities. There has been some progress made with regards to production and dissemination of hybrid seeds, as well as development and availability of soil testing techniques. But overall, we still see that farmers are using outdated fertilizers, outdated fertilizer recommendations. Although there have been some progress made with soil mapping initiatives, there's still a long way to go in that regard. And then a huge area where we have problems is extension. Many of our extension systems are severely underfunded. And particularly now we're talking about fertilizer and soil health. There's no way we're going to be able to meet that challenge if you don't invest in extension services, in my opinion. Resolution 11 called for the establishment of the African Fertilizer Financing Mechanism. I will not say much about that because one of our panelists is the CEO of AFFM. I'm sure she'll provide us with a good update on that. I would point out that the FFM has yet to make progress in two areas. One is releasing finance from commercial banks. They are still quite risk-averse, even though there are credit guarantees made available by governments and donors. And the second is that country commitments to the FFM are still quite low. Only about 3 countries have made a commitment. Resolution 12 called for monitoring and evaluation of the resolutions. That was done by AU and NEPAD until around 2011, when the efforts sort of fell by the wayside. So we do need to do something to pick up in that regard. Your other question was, how can local implementation be assured?
Yeah, maybe we can touch on that. I think in the next round. I think after.
Okay.
One day.
Okay, that's fine. Then I'll stop here.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So, but I think the best order here, I think, is maybe let me invite Marie-Claire to tell us a little bit about the financing mechanisms. What has been our experience since Abuja declaration? Have we scored any successes? What are some of the challenges that we have been facing? And also, what is it that we can do able to raise the resources that are required to ensure that we have a successful, we successfully implement any commitments that we as a continent commit to. Over to you, Marie-Claire.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anthony. Good morning, everyone. Well, actually, the implementation of the Abuja Declaration was requiring huge investment in the fertilizer sector from different stakeholders, notably for fertilizer production, distribution, and use. So different stakeholders have tried to commit investment, and starting with African government, these have heavily invested in fertilizer subsidy programs to make fertilizer affordable for farmers. And actually, before COVID-19 and Russia-Ukraine war, the total spending on smart fertilizer subsidy program in sub-Saharan Africa was estimated at approximately $1 billion per year, which can be estimated at over 25% total public spending on the agriculture sector in the country where the subsidies were implemented. So though the subsidies contributed to making fertilizer affordable to farmers, they were not actually smart and targeted for a sustainable impact. And as mentioned, John, these have to some extent distorted the markets. So in addition to that, on the side of the private sector, actually private sector has invested over $15 billion, primarily focused on local production, on local manufacturing of fertilizer. And today, African continent produces 30 million metric tons of fertilizer each year. And this is actually twice as much as it consumes. So in addition to that, other investments were put into fertilizer importation, domestic blending, and this has actually contributed to improving the fertilizer availability on the continent. But also, as the previous speakers have mentioned, the private sector has not been enough supported to attract more investment. And as you have heard from Maria, most of the fertilizer produced locally is actually exported. So on the other side, the Africa Fertilizer Financing Mechanism was established with the purpose to be as one of the channel to channel financial needs for the Abuja Declaration. But this has not actually been the case. As you have heard, the African countries has committed, who have committed to fund AFFM, have instead invested in fertilizer subsidies. And meanwhile, the Africa Fertilizer Financing Mechanism used the fund available, which were amounting to around 15 million in 2015, to contribute to supporting the fertilizer distribution through trade credit guarantees. And these trade credit guarantees have proven to be successful in attracting private sector investment in the fertilizer distribution. So as an example, FFM invested $2 million into a guarantee in Tanzania. And this guarantee was leveraged 15 times and have enabled the distribution of over 67 metric tons of fertilizer to over 570,000 farmers between 2019 and 2022. So in that share, there have been some success. We can say that different actors have contributed in financing the fertilizer, but also, as we've heard, there have been some challenges, and this financing are not quite enough to finance to finance all the needs for fertilizer availability and affordability on the continent. And into that, different other financial institutions are contributing by financing the government through loans and private sector for the local manufacturing and blending. And as an example, the African Development Bank has contributed in providing senior loans to different fertilizer manufacturers such as Indorama, Dangote, OCP, etc. So this in a nutshell, this has been, these are what I can say about the challenges and some success with the implementation of the Abuja Declaration. So now if I may touch on what we could do to best finance the Africa and Fertilizer Soil Health Action Plan, where all the stakeholders still have the role to play, and they have to put the effort together in a concerted manner, and to improve access and affordability of organic and inorganic fertilizer. And this time, compared to the Abuja Declaration, the aspect of soil health has to be really emphasized to ensure that we make financing of fertilizer by ensuring that there is soil health, but also safe environment. So we've, for the fertilizer supply and extension services, actually, definitely this should normally be financed by the private sector. Government should create, in that case, a business-friendly environment that incentivize enhanced private sector investment in fertilizer production, research and development, blending, trade, and even farmer advisory services, just to improve productivity while maintaining our soils healthy. And the most, we also know that the most part of demand is financed by the farmers. If there is supply without demand, there won't be any use of fertilizer. So in that case, enabling access to food markets for farmers would definitely unlock the fertilizer financing for farmers. And government should therefore support financing infrastructure and logistic assets, as mentioned, Maria, to improve the availability of fertilizer, both organic and inorganic. But also this infrastructure and logistic could be actually used to channel this fruit crop produced by farmers to be channeled to the markets. And lastly, actually in support of the farmers, government should use technology to design or to redesign targeted, smart, efficient, and private-led sector subsidies programs to encourage soil health investment by smallholder farmers and towards sustainable fertilizer financing. Now, from the above three sources of financing or the way to finance the Soil Health Action Plan, you may wonder what would be the role of FFM. Actually, FFM role would be to support access to financing all the above mentioned stakeholders and facilitate adoption of new methods and standards in fertilizer financing. And FFM would work with different financing institutions to design appropriate and tailored financing solutions to the fertilizer value chain. For example, FFM continues working with the African Development Bank to increase financing for fertilizer production, blending, and distribution, mainly trying to build up a bigger envelope for guarantee program that will specifically support fertilizer distribution on different countries on the continent. So thank you very much. I cannot say much in 5 minutes, but thank you. This what I can say about the aspect with regard to financing, and welcome any questions. Over.
Thank you very much, Marie. Before I proceed, let me acknowledge the presence of our Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water, and Rural Development, Professor Obed Chiri. So going forward, I think we'll interface with the PS later, but going forward, I want to turn to my colleague from Nigeria. I think you have heard what Maria talked about in terms of the scorecard of the Abuja Declaration, and also what Marie-Claire indicated about the financing. Please tell us a little bit about how Nigeria managed to domesticate the Abuja Declaration and the commitments made back in 2006, and what lessons can be learned for other nations. I think from the presentation, I think that John did, I think he indicated that Nigeria is one of the countries that is advanced. Let me go back to the podium. About you have more advanced marketing infrastructure, so please, in 3-4 minutes.
Good morning, all. I'm glad to be here and discuss about fertilizer. I'm from that department under Federal Ministry of Agriculture, Non and Food Security now. If I should stay here for more than 2-3 hours, I don't think I will finish what actually happened within fertilizer sector in Nigeria. There was a tremendous exercise here and there to where we are today. It was not easy, but at least Nigeria has advanced in fertilizer sector. What I can say is, after the summit, 2006 summit, there was up and down to ensure that how can fertilizer be available, affordable, and even what quality and quantity. And that resulted to where we are to have the regulation, which is 2019. That's the Acts 2019 and Regulation 2020. It wasn't easy, but it was successful with the support of international bodies, especially IFDC and AGRA and some other supporting agent with acceptance from government. But it wasn't easy, but Nigeria has gained a little strength towards fertilizer because the act comes with its ban on importation of fertilizer, more especially NPK. Secondly, it comes with you can only import the raw material. So what I'm trying to say is, if you should allow me to stay here, we spend a lot of time. I will be here discussing how and where we are in fertilizer sector. But now I can summarize in just a few minutes. Fertilizer in Nigeria now is strong because we were able to build a platform whereby both the value chain from the manufacturer to distributor to farmer itself on a platform whereby if you buy fertilizer from A, our platform will know because there will be tonnage report on that platform developed. So there's a chain where the fertilizer passes through, whereby it is monitored both the adulteration happening around or conversion or diversion of fertilizer. So there are so many activities, but this thing is adopted from the summit. So this is what I can talk about how and where and what Nigeria have gone through. Otherwise, if we stay here, we will spend a lot of time and we will not get it.
I think one of the things he's mentioning is that it's important to have market information. There's the role of government in ensuring that the private sector really operates profitably, invests in the sector is very key, and it is important also to make sure that the issues of quality, I think has mentioned quality issues, that in fertilizer markets there are issues to do with quality. I think other countries are, particularly now that there's some quality issues being mentioned. But I think moving on, I want to turn to Lizelle. So Lizelle, your question is as follows. Raising the total amount of fertilizer used was a great starting point for the 2006 Fertilizer Summit decision. However, there is growing evidence that the effectiveness or efficiency of the currently used fertilizers is not sufficiently high enough to gain yields for the fertilizer used. So we are not getting enough from what we are using. So as we look towards 2030, what steps should we take to improve the efficiency of fertilizer used in the continent?
Thank you very much, Anthony, and good morning to everyone. I have so much that I want to say, but I want to focus on two key points. The first one is to say that it's really important to focus on the local context of where the fertilizers will actually be applied, which includes the condition of the local soils. Shami, in his presentation, indicated that about 65% of croplands are already degraded, or the soils are degraded. So if we apply fertilizer to a soil that's not healthy and it's not able to make that fertilizer available to the plant, it's not going to be effective. There's also a lot of soil acidity in many African soils. And if we think about the subsidy programs, for example, we need to, and not only that, any kind of fertilizer applied, how does the local context dictate the kind of fertilizer to be applied? For example, if we have soils that are already acidic and we use urea or ammonium sources of nitrate, we're going to exacerbate the soil acidity. So addressing acidity is not only about applying lime, but making sure that we also apply the right fertilizers to remediate the soil acidity. And then also the local context in terms of what is actually available in terms of mineral and organic sources of fertilizers, organic materials, the integrated nature of agriculture in any specific area, especially in African agriculture where crop production, grazing lands and livestock production and even forest management is so integrated. And there's often competition between those different land uses. So that's the second point that I want to emphasize, is that improving fertilizer use efficiency is not only a cropland issue, it's an entire agricultural landscape issue in Africa, where we often have overgrazing and grazing lands, which increases the pressure from livestock to use crop residues for livestock feed. And in terms of the landscape and rainfall and climate, it's very important to look at soil and water conservation in the broader landscape, in the hill slopes, which often coincide with grazing areas and forest areas, to make sure we control the water flow in the higher lying areas so that once the water reaches the croplands, it flows slower, we reduce erosion, and we increase the water availability in the actual croplands for fertilizer to be dissolved and be made available to the plants. There's so much more I want to say, but I'll stop with these two key points. Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you very much, Lizelle. Let me move on to Constance. Constance, the success of any continental commitment depends on adequate financing at national and continental levels. Tell us about financing experiences from implementing the Abuja Declaration 2026. What are some of the success stories? What are the challenges and what are lessons that you've learned for the forthcoming Africa Fertilizer Summit?
Thank you very much, Anthony, and good morning, everyone. Already our speakers have already touched on some of the success stories as well as the challenges. We've talked about countries allocating a good number of, a good percentage of national budget to fulfill the Abuja Declaration. For example, the fertilizer subsidy programs, both looking at cases of Zambia, Nigeria, and Malawi. We've also heard from one of our panelists about the establishment of the Africa Fertilizer Finance Mechanism, which has helped farmers access affordable fertilizer as well as applications. Looking at the case of credit guarantee projects in Tanzania, Nigeria, as well as Ghana. But let me also touch on the donor community allocating funds to projects and programs, especially developing the policies in several countries. For example, in Niger, USDA has supported the policy regulatory frameworks as well, and this is something that is also happening in Malawi as well. In terms of challenges, I would say the subsidy programs have not been as successful as we've wanted them to be. This is because even though we've increased fertilizer use, there's still been a lack of training on how much to apply for in terms of farmers, how much do they apply on the different crops that they're growing. As well as the Africa Fertilizer Financing Mechanism still in need of more funds to fully operate. We have heard that some African countries have not been able to fulfill their pledges, and this is an issue that we need to really tackle on. Going forward, I would say we need to have a soil health fund within the Africa Fertilizer Financing Mechanism, or rather strengthen it. We need to increase our R&Ds, innovations, looking at fertilizer use efficiency as well as soil health. To donor contributions to programs and not projects. Projects come and go. Most of them are 5 to 10, 5 to 10 years, and then after that, there's no that sustainability. But if we have money coming into programs, at least would be able to have that sustainability. Thirdly, multi-stakeholder partnerships and investment, especially on local production as well as fertilizers. In terms of government actions, we really need to repurpose our subsidy programs and take a holistic approach. It's not just about increasing fertilizer, but how much do farmers apply on the soil? And it's all about them understanding the types of soils that they have, as well as investing in local fertilizer manufacturing industries. We really need that. Thirdly, optimize the use of technology to enhance soil health and fertilizer usage. I'm happy that we have donors such as USAID, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Currently within IFDC, we're implementing what we're calling the Soil Space to Place program. This is the use of satellite imagery that helps farmers understand the types of soils that they have and recommending the types of fertilizers that they can use on the soil, as well as on the types of crops that they have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Constance. I mean, there's a lot that is coming up here. I think Lizelle said, I think it's not just a fertilizer use problem. We need to have a more broad view in dealing with the problem. From Constance, he's saying our subsidy programs are not as effective as we would like them to be. We put so much money into these programs, but I think we need to have a much more holistic view of these programs. We need to probably make them more smart, because with climate change, I think it is very important to utilize these public resources in a way that would deal with climate change issues. And you can see I think we have about 10 minutes to conclude this discussion, and so that we can open it up to questions and discussions with you. But before I do that, we are beginning to look forward. And there's something that is happening in Malawi. So I want to invite my friend, William. I know the summit has not taken place yet. And there are things that are already happening on the ground in preparation for for the implementation of the action plan. So if you can tell us what is really happening in Malawi, how are you preparing to implement the forthcoming action plan? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anthony, and good morning. So in the case of Malawi, we have generally looked at this process in terms of domestication and also preparing for implementation of the action plan, more of a process other than some kind of one-off event. So what we have done is we have looked at that continental framework, which was presented earlier on as a draft, merely as a guidance a framework from which then we could move forward with our processes. We have also emphasized on one principle, which is essentially local ownership and also local leadership in terms of moving forward with the process. So there have been a number of incremental steps which we have taken up as a country, led by government through the Ministry of Agriculture. So one of the initial steps have been a number of studies looking at fertilizer and soil health in terms of the policy and the regulatory framework, and also looking at practice on the ground and some of the challenges within the fertilizer and the soil health dimension. And the further steps have included a number of extensive and intensive consultations with the various stakeholders to ensure that there is inclusivity. So these have included the government, private sector, farm organizations, agro-dealers, as we heard earlier on, in terms of their key role, and also development partners. All of those to be have been part of the consultative process. And then from those consultations, we began drafting the country position, which kind of consolidated everything as far as fertilizer and soil health are concerned. And then from that country position, now we transitioned to develop or rather draft our 10-year action plan on fertilizer and soil health. I think it's got about 7 priorities, which I think if you look at them, you see that there's a lot of interface or linkages with those 4 outcomes which were presented earlier on from the draft continental action plan. Now, the other thing also which we have considered to ease as we look forward to implementation is to make sure that there's alignment with the national policies and also strategies, so that the action plan should not be seen as an island, but it should be part and parcel of the broader national strategies and the policy framework. So it's well aligned to the national fertilizer policy and also the national agricultural policy and also the national agriculture investment plan, and also more importantly to some of the medium-term development strategies for the country, like the first 10-year implementation plan for the Malawi 2063. So we have looked at that, but again also in the course of looking forward to implementation, working with partners like AFDC and others, there is a process to look at also developing the complementary or supportive legal processes for the other input-related interventions, such as regulations in terms of the fertilizer and also regulations with respect to seed, so that we look at everything in totality as we move forward. So now we're looking forward to a lot of efforts around resource mobilization. As you know, there should be a lot of emphasis now once the summit is held in terms of implementation as we move forward. So maybe that's what I can share in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you very much, William. So it's private sector-led, government facilitated, is that right? The process that we have so many stakeholders involved in making sure that we solve the problem. But government has to facilitate and ensure that we put the policies in place or facilitate discussions so that we can have a strategy that looks into the long term. I also had evidence-based. They all started from generating what is it in Malawi that is constraining productivity, fertilizer supply and demand, and this is what is informing the discussions. So there is a role, you can see a clear role of our centers, our ReNAPRI centers in different countries, in ensuring that they work with stakeholders to begin to have an action plan, localize the action plans. There's going to be a continental action plan, but the most important, I think, thing I'm hearing is that we need to domesticate those plans. They have to become part of our day-to-day activity in government, as well as private sector can then put investments into action to help the farmers get the productivity we need. How many minutes do I have left here, or I should just maybe open it up? 8 minutes? Okay, I have 8 minutes. So what I want to do is I want to tease the panelists a little bit. We heard that to solve this problem, there's not only one person or organization that can deal with the problem. There's a role for government. There's a role for international partners. There's a role for research institutions. There's a role for private sector. So I want to, maybe let me start with Lizelle. What do you think ReNAPRI and ReNAPRI should do in helping resolve this problem? What do you think is the role post the summit?
Thank you, Anthony. It's a very good question because each institution has certain strengths that it speaks to, and it's important to implement those strengths. So I want to bring in a topic that I think hasn't been mentioned yet, because in terms of policy research, there's so much being done, there's so many topics to research, but I think something we really need to look at in terms of implementing the summit outcomes is localization within the country level. Because at the moment, domestication goes down to national level, but decentralized implementation is going to be critical. I've heard in this process that some countries mention they have decentralization policies, but they are not necessarily being implemented. And this should actually go down to the watershed and village level, where we've seen a lot of the success of local communities improving management of their croplands, grazing lands, etc., are founded in watershed or village level natural resource management committees. Villages and communities coming together and planning their agricultural resources together for a joint vision of how to improve their agricultural productivity, which links to incentives, because then this deep-seated understanding and collective planning of natural resource management and agriculture then automatically drives incentives for improved management. So in terms of ReNAPRI, for example, I think looking at this more decentralized and localized success stories and avenues to implement and support at the local level would be very valuable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maria, I have not forgotten you, so it's over to you. You have been interfacing with the policymakers. What do you think is the role of government in ensuring that we implement the forthcoming action plan? If you have anything to add in terms of what ReNAPRI should do please go ahead. You have 1 minute. You are on mute, Maria.
Sorry, with regards to what ReNAPRI can do, I think you're very good at staying abreast of emerging issues, conducting research, and sharing the findings broadly through webinars. So I think you need to do more of that. I think you also need to work to improve your relationships, if you haven't already, with policymakers and especially agricultural parliamentary committees to share your findings and insights with members of those committees so they can help use that evidence to improve their decision making. I think you could also support the monitoring and reporting efforts of various institutions around these sort of summit decisions. Such simple things as reviewing and improving survey instruments, assisting with evaluation of results, filling in gaps, in other words, where sometimes there isn't the capacity for it. And then I think you could also do some research to encourage more collaboration between the private sector and research institutions. We've seen examples of the Agri's PASS program, the program for African seed systems. It worked very well in terms of promoting seed companies to work together with national research institutions to produce seed varieties that were appropriate for countries, and then linking those institutions to agro-dealers who would then sell the seed. I think if we could do more research in terms of models like that have been successful and raise awareness about them so that they could be replicated, I think that would be very useful. Your other question was with regards to government. I think governments need to, I know our ministries of agriculture are stretched very thin, there's no question about it. But I think they really need to impress upon their development partners the importance of reviving and strengthening our extension services, particularly as we're moving forward with the implementation of the 10-year action plan. We cannot talk about introducing soil health management strategies, improving farmer use of fertilizer, improving how they use it more correctly, more efficiently, without really substantive extension support. So that's an area where I would really like to see our government put some investments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Constance, do you want to say a word or two on this question?
All right, thank you very much for the question. I would suggest that ReNAPRI continues improving policy regulatory frameworks, but then also focusing on dissemination strategies. We find that a lot of farmers have no idea on the policies that we're developing, the regulations, and we need to go out there and let them know what is in the policies, what is in the regulations, help them understand what is expected of them.
Vandi.
Indeed, ReNAPRI has a very large to do, in the sense that government is an institution, ReNAPRI is an institution. There should be synergy. You can make a policy, make it in whatever number, in whatever you want to do. But if you cannot go to the root of a government with that policy, I don't think it is achievable. We need to have a very good relationship with our government and the institution, because policy is something that ReNAPRI can develop a policy that can be active or inactive. It is active when you understand it from the government point of view. Inactive if you didn't understand from government point of view. So therefore, Africa is large enough in such a way that if it is done in A, why not do it in B? So we have to develop a policy in consonant with some of government policy, not developing a policy that, okay, is suitable. No, develop it in consonant with government policy. And I think there will be a very good synergy if it is done that way.
Thank you very much. Yeah, ReNAPRI basically is a consortium of agricultural policy research institutes. Our role is to catalyze evidence-based policy making. So we work in collaboration with stakeholders, including government is our main partner. And thanks for that input. Okay, I hear the alarm has gone off. It's signaling that I have to open up this session. The panelists were just there to really just give us some insights, but we want to have a discussion around what needs to be done. I think looking in the past is okay, but not very okay, because there's nothing that we change what happened in the past. What we want is to look forward. So your questions, your comments, your interventions should help us think about the future. So that's all that I'm asking us to do.
All right, thank you. Please give them a round of applause as we open up this session. Doc, don't go too far. I'm sure there'll be a question for you as well. Now, I will start off with an online question, and I think we will throw it to all of you to just answer very briefly. And it says, is it true that most of our soils are degraded, but relocating to new fertile soils may not be an option for some farmers due to limited croplands? Hence, it is crucial to know the health status of our soils so that we know how much organic matter, lime, fertilizers, and other materials our soils require to be productive. Hashtag know your soil. So I think maybe you can all just briefly chime in on that as we wait for others to give us their questions. If you do have a question, please just raise your hand. We will come to you. And wow, that was quick. All right. So please, could you answer that while we head into the audience? I think we can start on that end, on the further end, and then we come this way.
If I understand the question clearly, soil degradation, I think. Well, actually, there is soil degradation, definitely. Basically because of some things. One, under, over, or average utilization of all these fertilizers. Definitely it brings about soil degradation. So, therefore, it's a gap we should now use to ensure that farmers are persistently educated on the use of these fertilizers. Otherwise, they will overuse it and it will cause degradation. Underuse it, it's a degradation. So optimal utilization is always an advocate to farmers, such that we can maintain the soil health. Otherwise, we will not get it.
Yeah, so maybe I can just add to the response from my colleague. I think that indeed that is true. I think like in the case of Malawi, we have the same experience. I think we've got about 7 studies carried out so far in farmers' fields, which have provided the same consistent message that there's a significant decline in terms of crop response to nitrogen-based fertilizers, which is a key concern. But I think that moving forward, a number of considerations. I think one of them is to look at area and crop-specific fertilizers, specifically looking at improving blending and also combining that with the extension so that farmers have access to the right and timely extension advice so that they can actually improve in terms of what types of fertilizers they apply and also timing and the like. So hopefully with that combined with the good agricultural practices, could begin to heal the soil, which we now know that there is a crisis in terms of the soils. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that question. Let me just add on to what William has said. It is true that most of our soils is degraded. Going back to the case of Malawi, we've been utilizing a lot of old soils, which has not been producing much yield. So the solution is definitely integrated soil fertility management, utilizing both inorganic and organic fertilizers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think a lot has been said. I just want to, because the person asking the question mentioned that many farmers don't have virgin or fertile soils to expand to. I just want to mention that in sub-Saharan Africa, actually, since the year 2000, most of our increase in agricultural production has come from extensification or expansion of agricultural land into grazing lands and forests. So the areas of fertile land to expand into are becoming very limited anyway, and it's something that we really need to change and move more towards intensification. But it is a challenge when farmers have access only to soils that are already degraded. So it is very important to have the combination of local and indigenous knowledge of what serves best in those soils and combine that with the best scientific knowledge available. I've heard 2 weeks ago in Lusaka, a young lady from Zambia, for example, saying her mother farms and she knows what to do, but she can optimize her production if she can get the scientific information that will improve the production that she's already implementing. For example, row spacing or the kinds of organic materials to apply, or how to do to composting and so on. So I think improving access between research finding and research services through extension directly to farmers is a big part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have 10 minutes? No. Just kidding. Yes, I want us to focus on production of fertilizers within the continent because, yes, we can talk about financing, we can talk about everything, but the production of quality fertilizers within the continent is very, very critical. How much are we producing now? And we set clear targets as to when we want to be self-sufficient in fertilizer production. I say this because if we import too much of fertilizer, it has repercussions on our exchange rate, and also issues about quality of fertilizer is very critical. We have been importing very low standard fertilizer. So I want us to set targets and try to produce and be self-sufficient. Thank you.
Can I have somebody from that end, and then we'll come back this way. Let's just play across the room so that everybody gets a chance.
Hello. Actually, my name is Ezekiel FB. I have the question to the many speakers and the okay, the main focus is to increase the fertilizer use in our continent. But we know that agriculture and forests contribute, the current situation, contribute about 20% of the greenhouse gases emissions. One of them is the nitrous oxide due to the use of fertilizer. And also, I think John said that it's about the 62%, if you correct me, is facing the issue of the degradation. So how do you connect the conservation agriculture to fight this land degradation and reducing the greenhouse gas emissions in your focus? Because it seems that we are, while we are busy solving the problem of fertilizers, we might create other problem of global issues.
Does anyone want to take that?
Well, we ask a few more questions. Okay.
I think we can have Shami to take that.
Okay.
Hello. Yeah. My name is Gideon Obare. I have maybe two questions and comments as well. During John's presentation, I think he mentioned something to the effect that land is diminishing, land access to farmers. So is there any way that maybe policies and stakeholders can intervene in addressing these diminishing land sizes vis-a-vis the effect of small land sizes to soil health. Number two, the challenges, and this goes to Mary, I think Wansala. Challenges regarding to achievement of the Abuja action plans. What have been the challenges per se? Because I think I got like, okay, what has been implemented is about 50%. And then 1 billion is used, 1 billion USD is used per year by countries. Is that sufficient when you think about the number of countries in Africa? In Nigeria, you're saying you have a plan from production all the way to consumption. Right now, I'm thinking of heterogeneity of farmers. So maybe a farmer requires 5 kilograms of fertilizer, another one requires 100 tons or so. So how is it accounted for along that chain? Thank you very much.
Good morning. It's afternoon now. Good afternoon. It's morning. Oh, yeah. All right. I haven't changed my time. Okay, my name is Charles Jumbe. I'm from Malawi. I'm a farmer. I have less than 0.5 of a hectare. But because of the condition that government sees in me, I'm keeping orphans. Government has decided to give me 4 bags of fertilizer to apply on this 0.5 over hectare. Would you blame me if I say that because I don't need all that fertilizer? Would you blame me if I sell to somebody who is going to make it more productive, use it more efficiently?
Right. Thank you, Chair. All right. I think we should applaud the speakers and the panel for, I think, very nicely identifying the whole range of actions, well, activities that need to occur to implement this soil health initiative. However, I think we need to discuss in much greater detail who is going to implement these activities. And in particular, you have millions and millions of smallholder farmers that need to adopt different strategies: conservation farming, adaptation to climate change, increasing fertilizer use efficiency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For millions of farmers. Now, who is going to liaise with farmers to implement the actions that Shami and John and the panel have identified? And who else could it be but a well-functioning extension system that has the scale to reach farmers in the multitude of different agroclimates, soil types, elevations, rainfall systems? All of that variation requires extensive localization and adaptation in order to help develop the range of recommendations to be implemented by farmers. So I'm really happy that Maria identified the importance of extension. However, the issue there is that if there's not a national ag research system that is providing best practices, then the extension system really has nothing to extend. So there's this necessity of linking a national extension system with a well-functioning R&D system, which both of the keynote presenters did highlight, but I think making sure that we keep those issues front and center. And the moderator said, what does ReNAPRI need to do in this process? And one of the things that ReNAPRI could be doing is making the case for the importance of governments investing much more in both a national R&D system as well as a national extension system. Thank you, Chair.
Ma'am, I will hand to you. Sir, you will be the final one, and then we'll let our panelists.
Fine.
Thank you so much. Mercy Chikoko, Nutrition Officer for FAO Sub-Regional Office for Southern Africa, covering 15 countries. My comments are to the presenters. Thank you so much for all the presentations, but mainly my comment is to the keynote speakers. I think they mentioned an important point that it's important for fertilizers, both organic and inorganic, or the soil health, to translate to nutrition or human nutrition, particularly because there are some micronutrients or deficiencies that happen in human beings that are directly related to soil. We know that, for example, the soil health translates to good nutrition in two pathways. I think one is straightforward, diversified production, but the other one is where issues of selenium, zinc, or goiter, because goiter is a deficiency that comes because there's no iodine in the soil. So I wanted to just find out what are the linkages and what actions are being taken to ensure that soil nutrition and health translates to human nutrition, particularly in that pathway of the organic and inorganic fertilizers. Thank you.
Sir, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm Ambassador General Idro from Uganda. I want to separate core functions from the periphery functions. So what are the core factors in this matter of fertilizer in Africa? I think we can produce it. To me, because we can produce it, but we have not addressed that matter, we don't have it. I was happy the other day when the president of Zimbabwe said we're going to export wheat. We were importing wheat. We are now going to export wheat. What happened? The scientists did it and government adopted it. So in this matter of fertilizer, I think we have enough waste in the urban centers. We have enough waste in the farmlands to be able to convert it using science and technology so that we can convert what is not available into what is needed. And the job of science is to do what materials can combine to get what you want. So I think for me it's very important that we have identified fertilizers here, but the source, the core factor is the supply. Instead of wasting these resources, we do it. Africa is now about to to have self-sufficiency in wheat. Ethiopia declared so, Sudan, Zimbabwe. We're also doing the same with rice, starting with Tanzania. I think we should work towards making Africa self-sufficient in production of fertilizer. The issue of its distribution, the issue of its finance is a simpler and a lesser target. And the market is the one which will finance it. If I give you how much money we're using in terms of drinking beer, in terms of driving cars instead of tractors, I have the data. I think we can afford to make this. So I don't think we should sympathize and say farmers don't have it. I even know how much the farmers use on telephone as revenue. They have this money. So let's get a comprehensive understanding of these issues so that we can get fast things fast. And we should start by producing it. And the scientists are here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so maybe if I could have a go first and pick, I think, on 3 questions very quickly. Yeah, I think the first question I want to respond to is about promoting local production of fertilizers. I think it's important to emphasize that Africa at large scale is currently producing close to 30 million tons of fertilizer already. If we look at some of the big producers like Morocco, Nigeria, there is significant production on the continent, but much of it is already exported to the extent that Africa imports 90% of our fertilizer requirements currently. So we need to look not just at production, but at the distribution channels that would encourage local, regional, and national trade to utilize some of the production capacity that is already existing. Having said that, there's also scope to promote localized production in specific areas where resources are available, and that's one key area that the action plan addresses in identifying some of those areas where there is comparative advantage of using locally available resources to bring production closer to the consumption areas. So I just wanted to highlight that we already produce a lot more fertilizer than we are currently utilizing, but a large part of it is being exported. And I think there was a very interesting question on the negative potential consequences of fertilizers in relation to greenhouse gas emissions. Nitrous oxide emissions and other negative environmental consequences are unavoidable, but can be minimized. And how do we minimize them? By ensuring that we have the right recommendations for specific crops and specific sites, and then also complementing fertilizer use with other resources, such as organic resources that optimize not just nutrient supply, but also the long-term soil fertility build-up, and then reversing land degradation, which is a benefit that counterbalances some of the emissions that are inevitable when fertilizer is used. And conservation agricultural systems require residues, and residues require nutrients, and in that case, mineral fertilizers are a key essential ingredient for stimulating and sustaining crop productivity. There's normally a debate about organic versus inorganic. It's not a case of either or. It's a case of how do we optimize the combination of complementary resources to ensure that we achieve the short-term goals of increasing productivity and maintain soil fertility in the long term. I think the comment on biofortification is very much spot on. We should not just be looking at increasing production, but the yield quality and the nutritional values of food produced is very important, and that's why micronutrients such as zinc, selenium, iron are very essential to address in fertilizers, not just for the benefit of productivity, but also for the quality of the food that is produced, so that we address the issues related to heat and hunger, where we produce low-quality food that doesn't address nutritional needs of rural communities. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to focus on two questions. The first was on land access to farmers and the effect of small land sizes on soil health. So I cannot speak so much to policy supporting increased land size access to farmers. I think that would be very much a local government issue as well. But I just wanted to mention, in terms of small land sizes, I think in many ways small land sizes are maybe more conducive to improving soil health because it requires less labor, less inputs, and it's easier to manage than larger land sizes. But what I want to bring in here is when we start looking at the larger land sizes, another issue that hasn't been mentioned, and it's actually not emphasized very strongly in the Soil Initiative framework or the action plan, is mechanization, that has come up in many subsequent discussions, where one farmer or with labor can only produce effectively and productively on a certain smaller area of land. So if we want to look at increasing food productivity, we need to look at larger areas of land, which then necessitates mechanization as well. And then the second one I want to speak to is the gentleman from Malawi with the 5 hectares, asking if we would blame him for selling the fertilizers. So let me put you at ease for now to say no, I'm not going to blame you. But depending on the context, but I do want to say what I see is opportunity. I imagine an orphanage or feeding orphans and having 5 hectares of land, depending on what the status of the soil is. Say again? 0.5, okay. So that's a much smaller scale. But the idea still persists that in terms of They will speak of extension services and capacity development. So the great opportunity would be to utilize the fertilizers provided and make that part of the training and engagement of the orphans to learn sustainable agricultural productivity on that 0.5 hectares of land, especially with highly nutritious vegetables, as part of feeding the orphans themselves. And I think bringing in that kind of education and self-sufficiency from a very young age is incredibly empowering for young people that are already in a very difficult situation. So I just planting that seed. Thank you.
There was a question from one gentleman in regards to who is going to implement the activities of the action plan. I'd like to take you back to the Abuja summit. We had the idea that most of the 12 resolutions should be implemented by the government. But then over the years, we've sort of left out the private sector. And I believe that we need to tackle this in a holistic approach. So who is going to implement the activities? That would definitely be both the private sector as well as the government through the extension services, as well as impacting and building the capacity of agro-dealers. Thanks.
Yeah, so perhaps a lot has already been said, but I think I can just add 2 points. I think one point related to production of fertilizers in the continent, I think is just to emphasize that there's a key role in terms of national governments. I think there's a lot which all the different stakeholders can do, but I think national governments are key in terms of creating an enabling environment for private sector to be incentivized in terms of blending and even in terms of manufacturing of the inorganic fertilizers. So there are lots of challenges around the logistics, distribution in terms of the physical infrastructure which exists in most of these countries, which kind of makes it much more expensive in terms of doing business. The other point which I wanted to add, I think more generally, it seems like there's a very key role as far as the integrated soil fertility management is concerned, I think to address a number of issues which have been raised by various speakers who made interventions from the plenary. I also want to agree with the point raised by Professor Tom Jane in terms of the importance of a well-functioning extension system, but I think perhaps also to add that in addition to a well-functioning extension system, there's definitely a need for a very strong and well-functioning national agricultural research system. Thank you.
I think I have one question basically from my brother who says, how can I get fertilizer along the chain in Nigeria platform? While what I will say here much is Nigeria is very, very large, one. Two, the platform is created basically for demand and supply as well as quality control. You can produce, and what are you producing if you are not controlled? So therefore, if assuming, as we said, I'm a farmer and I want to get a ton of fertilizer, in our platform, all the agro dealers are there, the manufacturers are there, the blenders are there. So what you want to do is request from either of the blender, and we know because the manufacturing country, manufacturing or blenders will report the tonnage that person requested as an agro dealer or as a farmer. If you request as a farmer, you go to the agro dealer, and the agro dealer will report the tonnage you requested for to your farm along the value chain. Either you are a large or small scale farmer, because The agro dealers have a wider places in interior places where farmer can access fertilizer. We control who does what, where is it coming from, how is it going? Because mostly our fertilizer that is being exported also control. If you didn't control, most of it will go without control. It is in the platform. So it's a complete chain. We have, as far as you say you are a farmer in Nigeria, you must be registered on that platform. We have farmer database, agro dealer database, blenders database. So we regulate. So if you, whatever amount you need or whatever tonnage you want, I think along the chain, it can be provided to you through a seamless way. Thank you.
Yes, are they still on? Maria, are you still on?
Marie-Claire is there.
Okay, Marie-Claire, please could you just give us your quick contribution as we wrap up?
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to contribute to the question with small-scale farms. And just want to mention that actually African continent has the most of arable land, which is not yet utilized, but also the aspect of implementing the soil fertility management practices for optimal use of fertilizer will be necessary. But also while trying to expand the production, being cautious about to avoid aspects relating to climate change issues and soil and fertility management, but also environment safety would be taken into consideration. The other question from Gideon about if investment were enough. Actually, 1 billion per year is the contribution from government into subsidy programs, and that's not enough at all if we speak about fertilizer financing. And as we know, government that are implementing subsidies, they don't provide 100% subsidies. Most of the time it will vary between 20% and 50%. And actually, even this portion have been increasing definitely with COVID-19 and the Russia and Ukraine war. But again, we know that, as I mentioned earlier, farmers are the most financiers of the input they use. And as Ambassador Ibrahim mentioned, securing food crop markets is really, really important to make sure that farmers have financing they need to finance to purchase their input, whether organic and inorganic. And in addition to that, actually, I think that if government opts for putting in place the policies to shift financing for importation for both fertilizer and even food crops towards local production, the aspect of financing would be swiftly addressed. So I believe that we still need big investment from different stakeholders, government, private sector, and farmers themselves to ensure that we have appropriate use of fertilizer, right quantity, right product, and right place. And actually, to lastly, quickly talk about the core factors that Ambassador Ibrahim mentioned, where, of course, financing is really key, but also distribution, as he's mentioned. But the reality today is that for today, most of fertilizer is produced locally, is exported simply because the return on investment on the fertilizer sales is much better. For example, it's more expensive to move fertilizer from Nigeria to the Central Africa than to Brazil. So the issue of building those distribution network, the infrastructure to make movement intra-Africa trade of fertilizer within the continent is really important, and that's a key role that the government have to play to ensure that the fertilizer produced locally, even the food produced locally, is provide more investments on those who are producing fertilizer and food. Thank you very much. Over.
Thank you very much, Marie-Claire. Please could we give our panelists a round of applause as well as Dr. Chapoto as we wrap up this session. Panelists, I may allow you to return to your seats. As all these discussions were happening, especially the last one when we talk about distribution of fertilizer on the African continent being a lot more expensive than it is to export it, I can't help but wonder if these are problems that will be alleviated by the Free Africa Continental Trade Agreement that I know Zimbabwe and a few other African countries have become signatories to. So as we now break for tea, that may be something you can discuss amongst yourself and see as we go forward what may be the other solutions to alleviating this. We come to certain points in time in Zimbabwe, especially where fertilizer is in short supply. And if we are producing enough to export, then surely that makes no sense. So that is a food for thought for us. Now, of course, our second session will be up in the next 20 minutes. We will be talking prioritization of agricultural policies and investments through value chain analysis. So that is the next session that we will be having in the next few minutes. I think, ED, please may I allow you to lead out your VIP delegation to the tea room. Please may I must take this moment to acknowledge, of course, the PS. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Orbit Jiri. He is the Permanent Secretary of Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development with the government of Zimbabwe. Please could we give him a round of applause for joining us this morning. PS, I think these discussions that we will be having this morning, I think you caught a very good portion of it, will be something that enlighten you in terms of where we stand and what the thought processes are with the various stakeholders around, and hopefully they will contribute towards policies that you all formulate going forward. But Edie, I will hand over to you to just lead the team out before I dismiss everybody else. Everybody else, please do remain seated. PS, Vice Chancellor, please may we ask you to join ED. I think it's the board as well that we require to to follow suit. All right, now as they exit, just a quick reminder that this is a time for those who had not taken time to pass through the registration desk and see Maria. Please could you make sure that you register your attendance. This is something we will require you to do every day of this conference. Please just pass through the registration desk and register your attendance. I see most of you have your tags, which is great. If you don't have your tag, please could you just take this time to also dash to your room, collect your tag. This will help with easy identification, help those who need to help us around the facilities to also easily identify which conference group you're with. So please make sure you do have your tag with you at all times. It is very, very important. I think it is safe to say it's 11:24. I will see you all back in here at exactly 11:45. Exactly 11:45. I know you guys are punctual, so I won't have to come and find anyone. But please, 11:45, we all convene for session 2. Thank you.
Into valleys, into mystical mountains, a place where mountains transform into hills with great spiritual and historical significance, where hills transform into curves. A place redolent with history, testament of the people who live there. A statement of power, resilience, and ingenuity. A place where adventure lives at every turn. I want to tell you of a place where people live in harmony with nature and wildlife. Hospitality awaits you.
Zimbabwe is not just a country, not just a place. It's much, much more than that. It's the sound of the birds early in the morning as the sun rises. It's the people you meet and the smiles no matter where you go. Our rich history, culture, and heritage. Our vibrant art, music, and creativity. Our mighty rivers. Cascading waterfalls. And enormous lakes. It's our pristine wildlife and nature, still so wild and untamed. From the rolling mystical mountains and dense forests of the Eastern Highlands, down to the breathtaking beauty of the Lowveld and the vast floodplains of the Zambezi Valley, across to the balancing rocks of the Matopos. Animals still wild and roaming free. It's the feeling of inner peace and relaxation. It's the rush you get from the endless adventure opportunities. It's the true beauty of a Zimbabwean sunset. It's the memories that will last forever. Zimbabwe is a feeling. Zimbabwe is a world of wonders.
Zambia, a jewel in the center of Africa. Offering a wide diversity of fauna